Okay, George Turner, it is such a pleasure to welcome you to JT the LA Storyteller podcast on this Saturday morning, given your very busy schedule these days. And I want to start by basically having you introduce yourself to the Los Cuentos listenership. This is a listenership with folks from all across LA County. And so I definitely just want to give you a chance to note your name and to know where you're coming from and what it is that you're up to between now, the summertime, well into November for the city and the county of Los Angeles.
Wow, that's a big question. Hi, I'm George Turner. I am running for Los Angeles County Superior Court Judge, seat number 39. I am born and raised in the city of Inglewood. I went to public school my entire life, even all the way up to law school. I went to at the time, the only public law school in Southern California, which was UCLA Law. Um, I graduated valedictorian from high school, graduated summa cum laude from undergrad at UCLA, and then went on to law school, studied critical race studies under some of the founders of that theory, so I can, kind of dispel some of the myths about critical race studies, and there are a lot of myths about it. And then I decided to become a public defender because I grew up during the era of mass incarceration and saw family and friends go into custody for relatively minor crimes and saw the sort of impact that system had on them. I've been a trial attorney for the last 15 years. I've worked at Inglewood, the Inglewood Court, the Airport Court, the Central Court, Compton Court is where I spent most of my time as a trial attorney. But this last year, I've been the deputy in charge of a small unit called the Homeless Mobile Unit that we've actually just recently changed the name to the Record Clearing Unit. And our specific edict is to help our unhoused neighbors get their records cleared, their criminal records cleared through a variety of different laws that help to sort of to change the landscape of expungements and record clearing. So we're all over the county now. People ask me where do I work? I'm like, I work out of a van. I'm everywhere from Lancaster to Pomona to Long Beach to Manhattan Beach, and all points in between. So we're trying to help folks who are unhoused get their records expunged. Um, and I'm a local kid. I'm a father of three, married to a therapist who went to USC, so we have a little bit of a rivalry in the house. I am running because, well, I'm running for a variety of reasons. I'm running because the law changed significantly over the last 5 to 7 years, whether it be Prop 47 or Prop 57, or Measure H or Measure H. Um, these laws changed because the voters of the state of California, and so even some legislators and community activists and members came to the realization that it costs a lot of money to put people in custody and is not having the greatest impact, greatest positive impact on the community. Over the last half centuries, we went really hard on building prisons. We built 26, and we only opened 3 colleges. I only built one, but opened 3 in total. And so the voters and the people have decided that the laws need to change to sort of rebalance the scales. But when you go into the average courtroom, there hasn't been that sort of change. And part of the reason why I'm running is because I think that you need to have bench officers who are willing to apply the law as it currently stands. And that's kind of what I want to do. The reason why I decided to run is because, because there are 2 different processes to becoming a judge. You could either be appointed by the governor or you can run and be elected by the community. And everything that I've ever done that's been successful, I've done it with the help of the community. I am a community kid. I literally live in the neighborhood where I grew up. Never really left. Have very, very, very strong ties to my community, and I believe that when we organize and we fight, we win. And so I would be remiss if I didn't take advantage of the community at large. And so that's why I decided to run. There's that, and then also because I wanted to be I wanted to be held accountable by the community. Frankly, I know what it is to walk into a courtroom and not know who the bench officer is, and community members not know what they stand for, where they come from, and that sort of can be a daunting task. And so I want people to know who I am, know what I stand for, know a little bit about my story, so that they can have context.
This is an historic campaign on your part, a very personal and historic campaign on your part. UCLA alumni just as well. Shout out all the UCLA alumni out there tuning into this show, recognizing one of their own in George. And so, to be certain, the LA County Superior Court system for which you're running for a seat as a judge, that is seat number 39, they oversee judicial matters for all of the LA County residency. And that basically amounts to, at least as of 2022, 583 different judicial officers across all of LA County. There are 12 regions in total. That's split up between north and south, southwest, northwest, central, east, and so much more. And they have various departments naturally. So that's family law, that's criminal court, that is also juvenile justice or juvenile dependency, the foster care system, even something like a name change has to go through the LA Superior Court. And so I have to ask you, being in the city of Los Angeles, that if you're elected, if you can help me pay off some parking tickets that I accumulated over the last couple, actually. But although I asked that slightly jokingly, judicial officers or judges out there do see traffic court just as well. That is, they do manage traffic court just as well. And so if elected to the seat, you could be appointed in any one of the departments we've just named or another. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. So, there are nearly 10 million people in Los Angeles County. And so the judiciary is wide reaching. We're one of the largest counties and one of the most populous counties in the country. And it's funny because the law impacts us in a variety of different ways, being born and raised in the city. So I know what it is to have traffic tickets. Um, I'm very much so. And it's funny because even as a public defender, where I have been working in courts all over the county, one of the courts that I worked a lot in when I was in when I was in misdemeanors, was in the Metro Court. So for a few years, for more than a few years, almost 4 or 5 years, I worked in the Metro Court, and the only thing they handled is misdemeanor DUIs and driving with suspended licenses, and they handle many of the tickets in the Los Angeles area. So it's something that I'm knowledgeable about, but also, um, I am someone who is naturally curious.
Mhm.
I'm one of those people who, like, I guess you'd call me a nerd. Um,
Magna cum
which
laude from UCLA.
Yeah, and it's funny because I like to kind of change the perspective of what a nerd is. I think, for instance, Prince was a nerd, right? An amazing musician who discovered something that he was passionate about and wanted to learn everything there was to know about it. So he could go into a studio and do everything. Literally, it could be him and the guy who's pressing the record button, and he would play every instrument, record everything, and engineer an entire album. And so that's kind of where the sort of person I am. When I find out about things, I really get curious about them and want to learn every small detail of things. So I know a lot about traffic court because I've been there. Um, Family court, although I haven't been in family court, I have dealt in the juvenile court, and they overlap with dependency. It's funny. Another little anecdote is, um, a close friend of mine. They adopted a child, and we were a part of their adoption ceremony at the court. And as we were walking out, my wife looks at me and she says, "Man, you could be a judge. You could do that. You could proceed over adoption ceremonies." And I told her, I was like, I'm sure they do a little bit more than just adoption ceremonies at the family court day.
That's
But even with regard to civil, many of my friends who went into civil practice, I'm still friends with people who went into civil practice. Some of my closest friends, and like I said, if given whatever assignment I'm given, I am going to be passionate about learning that particular area. And as a public defender, that's kind of what we're called to do, which is, every case is almost every case is a case of first impression. So we have to learn the law, we have to learn the facts, and then apply them and argue on behalf of our clients. So I'm pretty confident that no matter where they put me, I'm going to excel. Now, having said that, I'll be the first to say that I would prefer being in a criminal court because I have a significant amount of experience, but also because we're so desperately needed in the criminal court. There's so many different things that are happening there, so many different changes that are happening there. And I feel like I could probably be the best benefit to the community there.
Yeah, I mean, and the reason I bring it up is twofold. So on the one hand, it's like it's important to note to the listenership out there that you're running for the seat, but you can be appointed anywhere. And so it's important just for framing and just for reference that there are various courts out there, a number of which you could be selected for. But it's not up to you once you claim that seat. It's up to a committee somewhere, a body somewhere, and naturally your experience informs however it is that you approach any one of these specific departments. But it should be clear that the LA Superior Court is not strictly a criminal court. There are family matters, there's juvenile justice, there's traffic court, as we were saying earlier, or metropolitan court. And the second reason I bring it up is because, as you know, when it comes to something like a traffic ticket, for so many people out here in the city of Los Angeles, for so many of these working class residents living paycheck to paycheck, a traffic ticket at the end of the month or in a 3 week cycle can really make a huge difference on their ability to succeed, on their ability to buy groceries, on their ability to pay for the materials they need for their children to go to school and so much more. And so it's interesting because this is one of those areas in Los Angeles that involves so many people on an unimaginable scale, but which impacts indigent or low income or extremely low income residents the most. And so I have to wonder if, say, there's a way in which the city of Los Angeles can begin to address that, right? That's not strictly on the judges to do. I think there are procedural matters to get through. There are citywide and even countywide initiatives that we can get through or pull through. But it's another one of these ways in which the communities that make the city are also placed into a real corner by the city from time to time when it comes to the policies and the way that we apply these policies kind of on a uniform level. So I bring that up for those reasons to be sure.
Absolutely. It's funny that you said that because that's also one of the things that I do as a deputy in charge of the homeless mobile unit. We have these things called homeless courts, and we call it a homeless court because we have a variety of different organizations show up to help folks who are unhoused or at high risk of unhoused get resources, whether it be access to their driver's license or getting their record expunged or something as simple as toiletries. And another thing that we do, the big thing that we do is we have court in the community where we'll have the city attorney and a judge meet the people and call cases. And many of the cases they call are low level misdemeanors or infractions. And they can get their cases handled right out in the community because, you know, living in Los Angeles can be hard. The rents and mortgages are astronomical. The minimum wage doesn't even come close to paying those. And one of the largest growing populations of folks who are unhoused, the largest growing unhoused population are folks who work 40 hours a week.
Yes.
So many of my clients who are in the homeless mobile unit There are folks who are working 40 hours a week, but quite literally living in an encampment, and they're working 40 hours a week. And when I tell my friends and family that, they say, I just can't imagine. Like, well, it's not imaginary. You can come and see it with me. These are people who have jobs. And so you're right. Someone gets a ticket, and they can't. That could literally cause someone to fall into homelessness. Because they can't afford to pay their rent, because of a ticket. And when I worked at Metro, I saw some really, really sad stories, because like the overwhelming majority of my clients were driving with a suspended license. And most times people's licenses were suspended because they hadn't paid a ticket, right? And having the ability to pay five, six, $700, $1,000 for a ticket, in a short period of time, or penalties and assessments accrue, is something that it just has a huge, huge impact. And I've had really, really, really sad stories about people who, I'll tell one. I had a client who was quite literally dying. He would come to court, and he was jaundiced. He would be bright orange. And the way it worked at Metro was that we'll put the case over for 6 months, and if you can get your license in those 6 months, then they'll turn a misdemeanor into an infraction, or they'll dismiss it. And my client looked at me in my face and said, "Listen, in 6 months I won't be here. I'm not gonna survive for the next 6 months." He said, "The reason why I'm here is because I didn't want a warrant to go out, and then they come and arrest me in my home, and then I have to spend a night in jail, because I would almost ensure that I'm gonna die if I spend a night in jail. So, I'll give you my next of kin, but I guarantee you in 6 months I won't be able to get my life, because I'm not gonna leave the house." Like, I'm actually risking my health leaving the house right now. And so I was able to take care of his case. But think about the sort of decisions that someone has to make, and the sacrifices that someone has to make, where a ticket is can have the impact of having, like, literally someone losing their lives or losing their homes. And that's another part of the reason why I want to run, is because I'm aware of those stories. I am not someone who's sitting high and looking low. I'm literally from the community. I literally have friends and family who are in similar situations, and I know about these stories, and how important everyone's case is. No matter how small it may be, everyone's case is serious, because it has a huge impact on them and their quality of life.
Yeah, and as you mentioned this, George, I realized that there was an article earlier this year noting that by 2030 alone, in the entire state of California, 1 out of 4 residents here will be over the age of 65. And so actually, when I think about something like traffic court, I think about the elderly population
Mm-hmm.
and folks who are making their way into their golden years, or
Mm-hmm.
also alone, without family members, without siblings, without relatives that they can lean on, who are truly out there in need of support from the city of Los Angeles, from the state of California, the richest state in the nation by a long shot, one of the richest states in the world. And I think a little bit about exactly what you describe, a situation in which a client or a defendant is facing a terminal illness, and yet they're having to show up to court to face a fine in between all of the other matters that they have to see through. That is going on. And just because it's not happening to one personally does not mean it's not happening to our neighbors, people that we reside on the same block with or drive through the same lanes with at some point. So I do want to give a shout out to, yeah, this kind of generational moment actually, because we will have more and more elderly people with traffic tickets, with eviction cases, having to choose between paying for food or paying for rent, and so on and so forth. And so we do need uh, people with experience with these sorts of matters on that bench in a serious way and on a far larger scale than what is currently the case. in my humble opinion.
Yeah, it's funny. It sounds like what you're describing is something that I struggle with, and that is that Los Angeles is a huge city that's composed of a variety of different neighborhoods, and we need to get back to knowing our neighbors, taking care of them, and addressing their needs directly. And to me, that's what democracy is really having a strong knowledge of not just national politics or state politics, but literally what's happening on your block and the block over. Or if you live in a smaller city, like I live in the city of Inglewood, you know what's going on in the city. And like that particular issue, the issue of us having an older population, is something that hits home to me with two parents who are in a very similar situation. So, you know, I you're right. It is important to have bench officers who are absolutely aware of the needs and the shortcomings and the challenges that everyday folk run into. Because too often in my profession and even in amongst judges, we can be very insular. As a first generation college student and a first generation law school student, I remember being very surprised at how many folks could say, no, my dad and my mom and my granddad were lawyers. Like, that's funny because my grandfather picked cotton in Mississippi. So, we're from a very different background. Um, but it's important that we have a diversity on the bench. That's why diversity is important. And it's funny because when you have a sort of uniform person who's a bench officer, someone who was a former prosecutor, or someone who was a very successful businessman, and these are the narrow group of people who become bench officers, then that particular perspective then becomes what is normal or reasonable, right? Whereas if you have a very broad or breadth of people who are on the bench, then you're going to get a, a bench that is more in tune with addressing the needs of the community, and something that I think is frankly more fair and more just.
It's great that you mentioned that because I think of your opponent in this race, Steve Napolitano, and I think of him respectfully. I think of his background and his work respectfully. I think about how he notes that he has been the mayor of Manhattan Beach for over 5 years, and how he's actually currently working in support of parole hearings as counsel for applicants for parole. And I think that's all critical experience for just any person to have out there. But in an article that I read recently, it was noted that you, as well as your colleagues at the Defenders of Justice, you all have this really unique experience working with indigent clients or low income or extremely low income clients. And so when I think of Steve Napolitano's campaign and one of these lines, which is that he's got a broad array of experiences out there, I think great, power to it. But there is nothing like knowing what it is to work with poor, extremely low income, or indigent defendants. And that cannot just be made up for theoretically, especially in the city of Los Angeles, a city full of renters, a county full of renters, a county full of workers who actually form part of the backbone of our economy and of our movement day in and day out. So, can you say a little bit more about working with indigent or extremely low income clients and how that really suits you actually for what the LA Superior Court sees day in and day out through these courthouses across the county?
Absolutely. So, as a public defender, we only can represent folks who are indigent. That we are the indigent defense firm of Los Angeles County, particularly folks who are accused of a criminal case, but even people who are accused of juvenile cases. And we also help with a variety of folks. And so, what does it mean to represent someone who's indigent? Because indigent is a big word. Indigent means that you cannot afford an attorney, It's like, when they say you have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford one will be given to you. That person is me. In Los Angeles County, attorneys can be very expensive. And so we basically represent, what I like to say is we are the people's law firm, because most folks can't afford an attorney. And when you are accused of a criminal case in Los Angeles County, we tend to get folks who are the most vulnerable. Um, Not just a person who lives in a poor community, but someone who lives in a poor community and doesn't even have the resources that that community even offers. So, I've had clients who, in juvenile court specifically, whose parents died very early on. They didn't get access to DCFS, and they have been on their own since they were 10 or 11 years old, you know. When I say on their own, I mean, literally living in a friend's backyard since they were 10 or 11. And I had multiple clients like that. When I tell you that I represent indigent people, I mean, I've had people who were, I remember one of the first cases that I had. Um, this was somebody who was an immigrant from Ethiopia, and he was living out. He came to Los Angeles fleeing, terror in his home country, and the offer that the district attorney or the city attorney was offering was an offer that would make him deportable, meaning that he could be deported back home. And as a new public defender, we're like, well, we definitely don't want you deported. This is very dangerous for you. And he looked at me and he said, like, let me tell you a little secret about me. He's like, I came to Los Angeles and I've been living outside on a bench since I've been here. And when I lived in my country, as bad as it was, I was at least I had some place to stay. And I realized the sort of mental health issues that go along with living outside for long periods of time alone, with no family, no friends. He's like, I was a college student back home. I didn't have, I have mental health issues now, and I didn't have those issues back home. So, your concern may be getting preventing them from sending me back home, but my concern is trying to get healthy mentally, because I don't, I'm not the same person I was. And so being able to just have those stories in my head, realizing that people who I represent are literally the most vulnerable people that our society has to offer. And being not just a representative of them, but like a zealous advocate for them. I tell my clients when I first meet them, listen, I am your attorney. You can be as honest or as dishonest with me as you want to, because I literally cannot tell the court or another lawyer anything that you tell me unless you give me permission. Right. So, um, being a staunch advocate for folks and getting to really, really know people and know their story and know the sort of institutions that have hindered them. One of the things that I learned as a public defender is that, like I said, many of our clients have serious mental health issues. They also have issues with drugs, and how those two things tend to run together. So, what do I mean by that? So, if you are a poor person or you are unhoused and you need a certain prescription for medication to stay well, and you also have to pay for therapy, because it's not just one or the other, it's both, it's therapy and medication. Um, if you can't afford either, then how do you survive? Well, many times you begin using street drugs because they're cheaper and they're more affordable, right? So many of my clients are folks who are, they say that they're the police report will say they're drug addicted. And like, no, the reality is they're literally just trying to be well, and they can't afford the legal medication. So, but they can't afford the illegal medication. Um, so being able to address all of these issues, all of these sort of sort of unique issues um, is important. And also the other thing that I like to tell folks is, you know, dealing with my clients as a public defender, many of them don't have a very strong belief in our system, right? I tell folks almost jokingly that I am not accustomed to people being happy to talk to me as a public defender, right? I'm not used to after I finish talking, people clapping or many times I meet my clients most times amongst their worst days, right? So most times people are not happy to see me, and they don't think that
It's
this
hard to
system.
imagine, George, because you
Yeah,
have so much brightness attached to you.
yeah, well, it's fun. It's funny because um, what happens is that they come in when I meet people and they see me and they talk to me, then they become a little bit. They say, "Well, at least I believe this guy. Maybe this
Yes.
guy maybe the system doesn't work, but this guy will support me." And that's kind of how when I introduce myself to people, I say, "Hey, I'm George Turner. I'm your public defender, and I'm here to help you. I'm just here to help you." And if that means telling you exactly what's going to happen, or telling you, being very detailed about what the next steps are, um, being detailed about sort of risks and rewards, I'm going to be completely open with you and honest with you. But the reality is, many of my clients are just in just really terrible, terrible situations that, um, it. We like to believe that it's all personal choice. You just made a bad decision, and if you wouldn't have made a bad decision, then you wouldn't have been here. And to some extent, that many of the choices that people are making are based on just really terrible circumstances, and those circumstances need to be changed. There's a program called the Office of Diversion and Reentry in Los Angeles County, and you get to see the sort of impact. They'll bring in people who are mentally ill, accused of a crime, and drug addicted. They go through this 2-year program, give them long-term housing, give them programs, give them counseling, give them cognitive behavioral therapy, give them access to medication. And in a year, these are productive people thinking about going back to college, um, being able to afford a decent housing. You see the change when you just change folks' circumstances. You know, um, what I try to explain to folks is, you know, um, it, if you have something to fight for, if you have something, if you have a home, if you have family, if you have friends, if you have a job that you feel respects you, and maybe you're not doing well, but your children are going to do better than you, or you see that you're having a positive impact on society. Those are the sort of things that are going to encourage people to buy into democracy, to buy into the system, if you will. Um, but when you take those things away from folks, when you take food, clothes, shelter, when you treat someone who isn't in the best circumstances as if they're responsible for their circumstances, it leads to sort of um, outcomes that aren't a net positive for the community. I was having this conversation with a friend of mine, like, think about what Los Angeles and California period would have looked like if over the last 50 years we would have built more colleges, right? If we would have built less prisons and more colleges, right? When I went to UCLA, my tuition was $1,500 a quarter, right? Tuition is $30,000 a year now, right? I mean, this is a public school, right? This isn't Harvard or Yale. This is a public school, right? This to be clear, UCLA is a public school, paid for with tax with our tax dollars. And I think, you know, what would have happened if we would have built more colleges? You know, um, what if UCLA wasn't the only UC school in Los Angeles? What if we have more UC schools in Los Angeles? You know, what if Dominguez, which my nephew goes to, wasn't the last college that they opened in Los Angeles County? Dominguez, which is wild. So, we need to start thinking about where we're putting our resources. And I know that you turn on the news and they'll tell you that the worst things are happening in the community, and there's this crime wave, and we're soft on crime, and but the reality is that the way you combat crime is not by putting people in cages. If that was the case, if putting people in cages was going to combat crime, then we would be the safest city in the whole world, right? Because our prisons, our county jail is packed to the brim, and our prisons are as well, right? No, the way
Send
you
people out of
combat,
state for prison because of how packed our
literally,
systems are in California overall. So even though you're a California resident, you will be shipped out to Arizona or Texas or Oklahoma.
correct,
We don't have enough
correct.
room anymore.
Literally, don't have enough room. No, the way you combat crime is education. You know, it's fourth grade and fifth grade teachers. It's colleges. That's how you combat crime. Um, and so, like I said, I can go on and on about these things, just from a personal perspective. And I love the opportunity to engage with you about these discussions because you know it's good to know what your bench officer's thought pattern is. Now, that isn't to say, because a lot of people are like, oh, well, you're a judge now. That means you're not going to follow the law. Anybody who knows me, who's seen me in court, knows that I'm not somebody who's not going to follow the law. I am going to follow the law. Of course I am.
Yeah,
Part
I
of the
don't
reason
get
why
that.
I'm,
I don't get that sense from you.
yeah, exactly. I'm going to follow the law. Of course I'm going to follow the law. In fact, part of the reason why I'm running is because I want to follow the law. Right? Because there's so many things in the law right now that can lead to this positive change I'm talking about that I like to see that applied more often. But I understand that yes, there are serious and violent crimes that are happening, but I'm saying that the overwhelming majority of these cases and these situations are situations in which people's circumstances need to change, not that we give them probation and call it a day, or give them prison time and call it a day.
Absolutely, George. And what I want to ask you with respect to this is essentially for, once again, those listeners across LA County who wonder a little bit about whether someone such as yourself, someone proudly from the city of Inglewood, can represent somebody in the Northwest or in the central area. Because going back to the selection and how these things are doled out, let's say that a voter is staring at their ballot, wondering back to this interview, I'm thinking, can George actually represent my interests, even though what I'm dealing with is a divorce and what I'm having to fight for is my home versus that of my former partners? Can George, given his experience with social justice and with his community in Inglewood and with juvenile cases, can that all still work for me as essentially a client of the LA County Superior Court system, given the divorce proceedings and such? And I, of course, want to give you an opportunity to speak to that voter directly, to let them know and let the city know, actually, as to how these prior experiences inform your sense of justice, no matter where you might be placed.
Absolutely. So it's funny being born and raised in the city of Inglewood, and then going to what was a culture shock that was UCLA, and then staying there for law school, and it being another culture shock coming from the undergraduate institution to the law school. I have seen and had access to a variety of different experiences. Um, and so I am knowledgeable about all places in Los Angeles County. And as a father and someone who's happily married himself, I've dealt with a variety of different family issues. And I would say that um, my who I am personally is someone who is really just dedicated to the idea of fairness, justice, equality, and making sure that everyone is heard. I think that that's one of the things that frustrates, particularly my clients who are indigent, is that they don't feel like their voices are being heard in the court. And I think that that's what a courtroom should be. It should be a place where people get their voices heard, they get acknowledged for their issues, and then they are made whole in one way or another. Um, and so that's kind of just my mentality. Now, with regard to um, you know, coming from different backgrounds, like I said, I am, as someone who's born and raised here and has been all over the county of Los Angeles, I have interacted with a variety of people. Um, and although not most, all of my clients have been indigent, I have been able to interact with folks who are not. Um, you know, Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. So, if my client, and this has happened before, my client who's indigent gets into a car accident and then flees the scene, you know, many times the person he's hit is someone who isn't indigent, right? And so, being able to interact with their um, insurance or their private attorney to get a just outcome for not only my client but for the person who was hit is something that I've had to deal with regularly. And also, ironically, being in the courtroom every day, being able to interact with the district attorney, being able to interact with the judicial assistants, being able to interact with law enforcement, being able to interact with social workers when I was in the juvenile court and experts. Um, I think I have a wide breadth of experience in the courtroom, and everyone. What I learned is that everyone brings their individual experience and sort of their experience in their culture, right? As much as we like to put on our suits and act like we are automatons and we're just objective, we all bring our experiences. And I think that it's fair that someone is explicit about their experiences, because when they hide that sort of stuff, then you get back into that whole objectivity lie where I'm just an objective arbiter of the law, and I don't bring in you know my family and my experience, and that's just not true. It's just simply not true.
Well, and for those who refuse to be objective out there, but who hear your campaign, who see your campaign, who have gone through this interview and who have become absolutely captivated by your passion for this work, by your ambition for this seat, how is it that they can get involved? How is it that they can support you? Where do they go? Where do they start? And what's next, especially over the summertime as you have more voters out there to meet?
Oh, so the way you can get involved. Well, first of all, where can you find me? Okay. I am mostly on Instagram and Facebook and other social medias. My tag is Turner, Turner, the number four. Four is my favorite number. Judge. So Turner for Judge is how you can find me on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube. I also have a website. My website is George A. Turner, the number four judge.com. And there you'll hear more about my story, see some pictures, and I'm going to have all of my interviews up there as well, including this one, hopefully in the near future, and also a lot of my endorsements. But what I tell folks is, as a father and a member of the community, you can find me literally in the community. You can find me at your local Costco picking up toilet paper for my kids. You can find me at the local park where my kids play baseball and soccer. You can find me in at many community events, particularly for folks who are unhoused, giving out resources and trying to get folks' records expunged. I am literally in the community.
And you're in the community, and so you're out and about.
Yes, yes. Oh, and then what can you do to help me? Okay, it's funny because I'm usually I'm not good at this part. Uh, so what do I need help with? Um, on November 5th, my name will be on the ballot. And although my campaign was very successful in the first uh,
In the
part of
primary.
the on the primary where I won by almost 64,000 votes, that doesn't mean that I got elected to become the judge in seat number 39. I need everyone's vote. I need you to spread that to all of your community members. Let folks know that George Turner, seat number 39, is running and that he really needs your vote, and the community also needs your vote. And in the near future, we're going to start going door to door, and we're going to be doing email blasts and text blasts to folks to let people know that I'm running. And then finally, I also respond to email. Believe it or not, my email address is George Turner for Judge. So there's no A in the George Turner. So George Turner for Judge at gmail.com. I do respond to email. And I am really, really thankful for the opportunity to talk to folks.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I'm thankful for your joining us on this installment of JT the LA Storyteller podcast, also known as Los Cuentos de Los Angeles. We will definitely have links in the show notes for folks to get further involved with you. But before then, I mentioned to you at the outset that we have some lightning round questions to get through. So if you're ready,
I'm,
I'm ready.
I'm excited.
I'm excited too. I'm excited too. So we'll start with a real softball question, actually, something really on the simpler side. And it's as simple as Kendrick Lamar or Aubrey Drake Graham.
Kendrick Lamar. That's really easy for me. He's actually a friend of Kendrick is a friend of a friend, born and raised in Compton. Loved his music since before he was Kendrick Lamar, when he was K Dot.
Sure.
Uh, he he's a Centennial alumni, and that's the team that we played at my high school, at Morningside High School. So yeah, I love, and I also think that Kendrick is one of those people who um, his music kind of transcends this era. You know, usually there's this idea that, you know, the rappers that are out now, the musicians that are out now wouldn't be very successful in the past. I think that he's somebody who would have been successful in the 90s and the 80s and the 70s and the 60s. All the way down to the idea that he was named after Eddie Kendrick. Kendrick came from Eddie Kendricks, who was a Temptation. So I love his music.
Excellent response on your part, especially for the city of Los Angeles. But of course, we said it was a softball question, so that's on the easier side.
Yes.
Now, I have to ask you, especially given your love for Kendrick Lamar's work, I've got to ask you about your favorite album by Kendrick Lamar.
Ooh, ooh, that's really hard. It's really hard because um
You still got to pick one. I know it's hard.
ooh, so Good Kid, Mad City was okay. I'm gonna have to go Good Kid, Mad City, and I'll tell you why. Um, I've had that case. The story that he tells, I had that exact case of a kid who was just from the community, who was just hanging out with his friends, who was college bound, and who was accused of a murder in self defense. So I've had that case, and I had it before the album came out. But when it came out, I was like, "Is this dude in my life?" Like, I didn't tell him this story. Is this
You
dude in
go
my
through
life?
forgive
Like,
mode.
like did he come to the courthouse and read through my notes? Like, so yeah, I'm gonna go Good Kid, Mad City, but I'm gonna give an honorable mention to The Pimp a Butterfly because I love the jazz aspect of that album. I love the jazz aspect of that album. I actually went to school with Kamasi Washington. So Kamasi went to school with me at UCLA at the same time that I was at UCLA, and he is a genius jazz musician.
I mean, yeah, what a back-to-back experience to look back on, right? To reflect on. Good Kid, Mad City, followed by To Pimp a Butterfly. I mean, I can't remember anything similar in my lifetime. You are before me, so you have seen a number of different great acts just as well. But for you to be able to share these words about Kendrick Lamar's work and how our generation has gotten to bear witness to such a profound master of their craft. That is all music to my ears, music to my ears. Switching lanes a little bit, but not entirely. I've got to ask you about your favorite Laker of all time.
Ooh, ooh. Okay, so I am a diehard Lakers fan. And I'm going to go, and this might sound wild, but I'm going to go Jerry West.
Wow.
And I'll
Okay.
tell you why I'm going to go Jerry West. My mom is from West Virginia. Okay, so we she came out here in the mid '60s, and she was following Jerry in high school. And she is the reason why my family are Laker fans. So when she came out here to Los Angeles, she began to work at UCLA, got to meet Kareem, right? Um, and so that's how long we've been Laker fans. And although I didn't get to watch Jerry West, I'm not going to act like I was a Lakers fan before I was born. Um, I think that his sort of obsession with the Lakers
Yeah.
has led to so many successes, including the drafting of Kobe Bryant,
Right.
including the putting together of that Lakers Showtime dynasty. I'm going to say that he's probably my favorite. He's my favorite Laker. Now, I'm going to give honorable mention to Byron Scott and Eldon Campbell because they both went to Morningside High School, and so you got to give love to the locals. And Byron wore the number 4, and I would love a Byron Scott throwback jersey because he's my guy. But yeah, I'm gonna go Jerry.
Wow, that is so good. That's so good. And so I've got to ask you, in a city of film buffs, in a city full of film lovers, um, either your first or your last LA film. That is one of the first films that you ever watched in the city of LA or about the city of LA, or one of the most recent that you've seen that you want to give a mention to before we wrap up for today.
Okay, so the film that I would like to give a shout to is this film called Dope.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that film is another one of those films where I feel like Dope and Boys in the Hood are two films that are like what I feel are loosely based on my life.
Mhm.
Right? So, um, Dope is about a kid who was born and raised in the bottoms of Inglewood, went to the school that was attached to the bottoms, which is Morningside High School, and but it tells the story from the perspective of a nerd, right? Who grew up in the neighborhood, knows folks in the community, and is college bound. And that was literally my story. One of the things, and what I like about the film is that not only is it filmed on location, um, is that it kind of tells a story of like this story that nerds are ostracized throughout their time, and then they go to college and they find their people. Like the reality is that by the time you get to be a senior in high school or junior in high school and you're a nerd and you're from the community, the people have accepted that you are a college bound person and they support you, right? They want you to go to college. You are a member of the community and they push you forward. They say, hey, we're going to be getting in trouble. You can't hang out. Hey, wait a minute. If we're all getting in trouble, I'll take the blame because I don't want you taking the blame. because you're going to go to college. You're going to do something. You're going to make our community better. And then, I mentioned Boys in the Hood as another one that is loosely based on my life because John Singleton wrote. So John Singleton went to the middle school that is attached to Morningside High School, and he wrote Boys in the Hood under the theory of what would have happened if he would have went to the high school. Instead, he got on a bus and he went to school in the Valley. But Boys in the Hood was a story of what would have happened had he gone to Morningside. And it's funny because I didn't get on the bus. I went to Morningside.
Wow.
So
Oh my
it's those
goodness.
are the
I
two
see. I see.
stories that
I see how
those
you
are two.
pull all these together. I see how you pull
Yeah.
all these together. And George, I've got to tell you, it's been such a pleasure spending this morning time with you, listening to the story of your campaign, listening to your notes for LA County voters out here, listening to your thoughts on Kendrick Lamar's work and the profoundness of his impact on you and I and a generation of other listeners. I can't wait to see and hear more about your campaign. And so for now, we are all set here. I can't wait to get this to the Los Cuentos listenership. But first and foremost, thank you so much for being willing to speak with me once again for JT the LA Storyteller podcast this morning.
Thank you so much. And hopefully when we have positive outcomes on this campaign, I can come back and we can talk more about details.
That sounds like a plan to me. That sounds like a plan to me. All right, George, I'm gonna let you get on with the rest of everything else out here today. Drive safe. I'm sure you already know. And let's bump some good Kid Mad City today.
Most definitely. That's good. Heavy rotation.
All right, George, thanks again. I'll be in touch.
Have a good one.
Ciao.
Bye.
Hey, it's J. T. Also known as JT the LA Storyteller. Here are Los Cuentos de Los Angeles. Also known as JT the LA Storyteller Podcast.